Well, I'd like to welcome everybody. This is Shadow of Truth with your host, Dave Kranzler from InvestmentResearchDynamics.com and Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org. And we have on the line, we're very honored to have the presence of Mr. Bix Weir from RoadToRuta.com. How you doing, Bix?
I'm doing well. I'm excited about the interview and all the topics we might get into. We never know what we do on the show. Huh?
No, we don't. So that's the good news. And if you don't mind, Dave, I've got something that's been kind of gnawing at me all morning that I wanted to ask Bix about.
I would love to hear it because everything under the sun is gnawing at me. So I'll sit here and listen quietly and hopefully learn something.
Well, all right. And Bix, I wanted to ask you about, just to start things off, Russia and China, as you know, have been acquiring gold and silver. They've been taking everything on the market and then some. And that's just to say nothing of what India has been doing as well. But Russia and China in particular, because they seem to have an agenda. And I wanted to ask you, what do you see as their agenda with acquiring all of this gold and silver?
Well, it's interesting because this is nothing new. And if anybody follows GATA, it goes back to even the late 90s and early 2000s. Jim Sinclair talked about it as well, that China was taking up 2,000 tons of physical gold off the market every year, kind of stealthily. And that, I mean, if you add up 2,000 tons a year since the 90s, that's a whole lot of gold. And Russia, I think Russia really caught on when they Putin sent one of his top advisors to a GATA conference in the Ukraine. And after he came back from that conference, Putin was seen, holding bars of gold and talking about gold. So this is nothing new. They've been planning for this for well over a decade, maybe even way back. There is some hints that China has been in the know on what Greenspan was doing in the 1970s, and I wouldn't be surprised if China held over 30 to 40,000 tons. And I know that's way out of the realm of what people think the total amount of gold is, but I've done a lot of research on that, and there's a whole lot more gold than the 180,000 tons that they're saying.
Yeah, and actually, Alistair McLeod has done similar research to what it sounds like you've been doing, Bix, and that's in line with what he's come up with, 30 to 40,000 tons, and he's actually produced a couple of articles around that, stating, being able to show the layman on the street to say, here's what it looks like, and here's the reason that I believe this. And what I'm really getting at is, is it going to be gold-backed notes? Is it going to be gold-backed currency? Is it going to be trading? Dave seems to have an idea that they may use it for international trade, but I don't think that they're going to be making jewelry or trinkets or objects of beauty with all this gold that they're acquiring. I think that they have something in mind for it, and that's what I'm getting at. What do you see them doing with it?
Well, I agree, and if you look at the population, just the regular population, they keep their savings in gold, and gold is a big part of their society, and they give gold out during times of dowry and things like that. And gold is a major part of all Asian economics. Always has been. India is obviously the largest importer of gold according to statistics, but that's we go down the line of statistics. Who knows what to believe? I do think China and Russia and most of the world is preparing themselves for an end of the fiat monetary system. I know in China it was Wen Jiabao, who was the premier of China. He was a mining expert and a geologist by trade, and his wife was a gold expert. So it's not like China doesn't know what's going on. And, what the transition will be, there's talk of gold-related, partial backing. There's talk of the special drawing rights at the IMF. backed by gold. There's all kinds of talk. There's a lot of talk of China coming out real soon and saying, hey, we don't have 3,000 tons of gold. We've actually got 15,000 tons or something like that. That might happen, and it might give a partial boost to their currency. But once the curtain is off on the gold backing of money, and I believe it has been pulled back, I don't see any kind of backing system working unless it is full redemption by the banks of the currency. This is after people give up on this fiat money system. So yeah, that's my take. Is there might be some attempts to do some sort of partial backing, but I don't think it'll last too long.
Do you think that the central banks of China and Russia are those Rothschild, not necessarily controlled, but are they Rothschild entities?
I don't think so. I think the Rothschild and the powers to be, the I call them the bad guys. I think they have lost a lot of their power, and the next banking crash will kind of prove that out. Will the people turn to their leaders and say, "Oh, help us out of this trouble. We've lost all our money," or are they going to say, "Hey, this was your fault in the first place. This unbacked craziness going on at the Fed and at the EU and all over the world. The printing of fiat money is completely out of control." I think the people will finally, when they lose their checking accounts and savings accounts, will finally stand up and say, "No more of this. We're gonna do something different with different people at the helm." So whether or not the Rothschilds control the central banks of China or Russia or whatever, I don't think that'll matter once the collapse happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of coming from the perspective that I think this New World Order movement is really a Western-driven idea. I think you'd have to believe that everything going on between the U.S. and Russia and the U.S. and China is sort of stage kabuki theater to believe that Russia and China are involved. And I think Russia and the United States especially despise each other. And what I think is, I don't know if I necessarily agree with your number, Bix, in terms of how much gold the Chinese central bank owns. I thought that the numbers that Alasdair Macleod had backed into were a real eye-opener, and he made a good case for why the PBOC gold holdings are in excess of 20,000 tons, and I believe that's probably in the ballpark of where it is. What I think is interesting is that they've announced that they're going to update their holdings. I think it's due in May or something. June?
Yes.
Yeah, and I honestly do not expect them to report a number that's the real number. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they roll out a number that is less than the number that the United States reports as owning, which is the 8,100 tons, which we all know is just theoretical holdings. It's an accounting entry only.
I would agree with you, Dave, that as long as the system is still up and running, I don't think China wants to do anything to overthrow the apple cart. I don't think Russia does either. I think they're winning this game the way it's going, and they're just fine with it running along kind of slow and smooth from their position, whereas the United States and the Western entities are kind of scrambling to do the same things they've done in the past, but it's not working anymore. So as far as the U.S. gold holdings, I've been asked a lot about this. I know there's gigantic gold mines that are hidden away in the U.S., in military bases. In California, Dianne Feinstein's hidden away these gigantic swaths of land that are gold rich in desert wildlife preserves. So at some point, I think when the collapse hits and everybody kind of turns to gold and say, well, we can always go back on a gold standard because that's what we've always done in the past. I think there's going to be an accounting of what's real and what's not real. And yes, I do think that the gold in Fort Knox has been swapped out or rehypothecated. But I do also think that the United States has other gold holdings far, far in excess of the 8,000 tons that they're just hiding away, waiting for that moment. And it's always been, at least since the 1930s, the plan of the United States to use everybody else's natural resources first, as long as they're accepting paper and electronic assets. Use all their oil, use all their commodities, use all their gold and silver first, and then when people stop accepting the fiat-backed electronic money, then return to a more sound system where you use your own natural resources, build your manufacturing and things like that, because no one's going to trade with us when they found out what we've done.
Where is all this gold currently coming from? As far as what China and Russia and India are all acquiring, where is that coming from?
Well, there's vast quantities of gold. The amount of gold out there was manufactured. The number was manufactured by Harry Oppenheimer in the 1960s, and he was the guy who owned Gold Fields Mineral Services in South Africa, also owned De Beers Diamonds, and everything in the official record is based off his determination through his expert analysis back in the 60s. That's why we have the total amount of gold ever mined in the 180,000 ton range. It all comes from Harry Oppenheimer and his people back then, and it was all a lie. And nobody really knows exactly how much gold has been mined. If you read about Yamashita's gold in Japan, hidden in the Philippine Islands, there's massive amount of documentation on that. Nobody really knows how much that is, but it's over a couple 100,000 tons. And then there's plenty of evidence of gold mines within the United States. One of the biggest is in Chocolate Mountain in California, where it was in the 1990s that they flew out 6 of these senators to go look at this mine that is now in a military base. And the amount of gold that was in there at that time was just unbelievable. And these congressmen said, well, we can't release this amount of gold because right now we're kind of on a pseudo fake gold standard where we potentially could need this gold in the future if people stop accepting these US dollars. So I also have information on a huge gold find back in 1906 timeframe within the Grand Canyon. And right now, you are not allowed to go in this area of the Grand Canyon. And if you're looking at conspiracies and secrets, just Google secret gold in the Grand Canyon, or even Egyptian artifacts found in the Grand Canyon. That stuff will blow your mind. But I do believe, and they did announce in the New York Times in the early 1900s that it was the largest gold find in the history of the world that would change everything. And all of a sudden, it went silent. So there's a lot of conspiracies and a lot of potential, gold treasures hidden around the world. But it's such a secret game that only the elite are allowed to play in the real numbers, that we're not going to know really how much gold there is in the world and who's got what until after the crash, I believe.
I'm familiar with that, with the gold story in the Grand Canyon. Actually, the History Channel has done a couple of different programs on that, and that you're not allowed, just like what you were saying, Biggs. They've got this area of the Grand Canyon quartered off. You can't climb on top of it. You can't rappel down into it. You can't be anywhere around it.
And it's guarded by the U.S. Marines, and both Obama and Bush tried to get some open up some mining rights in that area, and both were turned away.
That's pretty incredible, right there. But I'm familiar with the cave, is what it is where they found all of these Egyptian artifacts, which was really interesting. And it was right around the 1900s, and there was actually a couple of different newspaper articles that were written, that were produced regarding that. And the Smithsonian Institution came out, took a look, and apparently they gathered up quite a bit, if not all, of the Egyptian artifacts. And then the articles all got scrubbed and everything went silent right after that.
I talk about that stuff in my book. And the Smithsonian's knee deep in this stuff because every time there's some bizarre artifact found in the United States or even around the world, they call them the Smithsonian, and they gather up all the evidence, and it's just like that Indiana Jones thing at the end when they put the Ark of the Covenant in this warehouse. If it goes to the Smithsonian, it disappears.
Right.
It's crazy how this stuff. It'll sound so crazy, but the more you look into it, and the more I tried to go to that, get a pass to go into the Grand Canyon, and that's hard enough. But to get a pass to go into that area, it's impossible, and you can go nowhere near it. And if you look at all the mountains and the bluffs that are named within that area, they're all Egyptian names. The Mountain of Ra and all these Egyptian names for these mountains, and it's kind of obvious when you put the time and effort into looking into it, but they're not going to tell you about it in the mainstream, and it's really too much for people to handle. They have a hard enough time handling the conspiracy of rigging the gold and silver prices.
Oh, which is why we're here. We're not here for the Egyptian artifacts, but it's very cool, just all the same.
But they kind of all, and I talk about this a lot in my book because it covers all different subjects. They all kind of meld into one cohesive story about what has been hidden from the mainstream throughout the last 100 years. And it's really incredible how this is all linked together and why they hide natural resources in the ground and why paper money has still survived even after we went off the pseudo gold backing from 1971. It all gets back to, right now it gets back to computers and the ability to control the markets through computer programs. And I've done a lot of research on where these programs came from. It goes back to BASIC, the very first shareable computer program in the 1960s. John Kemeny was the inventor. Alan Greenspan was his best friend who invented computer banking and electronic assets. And you go back that far and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe how all this stuff fits together so perfectly.
Tell us about Greenspan and the HFT and BASIC and the computer programming and the ability for the banks to do the computerized rigging and how that all kind of came about.
Well, it really goes back to the early 1960s. Guy named John Kemeny, brilliant guy. He worked with Einstein on the making the atom bomb and all this stuff. But him and another guy invented a shareable computer language called BASIC. And BASIC is basically the foundation of all computer languages now and all computer programmers. I mean, the first thing I learned when I was in college in the early 80s was this BASIC program, and Alan Greenspan and John Kemeny grew up together. They went to the same high school. They basically competed over the years to see who was the smartest. And Greenspan loved the computer program BASIC and basically invented computer banking from using this program BASIC. And those who know Greenspan know he wrote the paper Gold and Economic Freedom in the 1960s. He was the biggest gold bug in the world. And Arthur Burns, the then Fed chairman, was his mentor in college. And he got Greenspan to write these computer programs that would help control the markets. At first, Greenspan was writing these programs to make money. And in his early days with, Townsend Associates or Greenspan and Townsend, he was making all this money. And then all of a sudden, his firm kept losing money ever since he joined the Council of Economic Advisors for Gerald Ford. Now, what I believe he did is transfer his computer rigging models and the computer banking system really to the Fed, to the Council of Economic Advisors with Arthur Burns at the Fed and with Gerald Ford. And they used these programs to control the markets when we went off the gold standard, because everybody knows when you go off a gold standard, the longest unbacked currency ever before this one last, I think it was 15 or 17 years, and that was the maximum. And everybody thought this system would end all throughout, but it hasn't, because they've been able to control the prices of every commodity by trading back and forth with their own computer programs, and they're using their prime dealers and they control any price. They'll bring it up to get speculators in and drive it down to wash them out, and they can steer a price anywhere they want because it's unlimited the amount of buys and sells you can do on an electronic version of gold and silver, and as well as oil and the US dollar. Everything is controlled on these computer programs. And then when Bush Sr. came into office, right before he came into office, Reagan appointed Greenspan as the head of the Federal Reserve in 1987. And in 1987, you might remember, it was that huge stock market crash about a month after Greenspan got in. And they were saying at the time, this was all computer driven. It was all these computer trades, automatic sell trades that were going off. And the funny thing is, if you look at all the big crashes that have happened since then, there's always a computer component to it. In 2008, everybody talked about the high frequency traders kind of losing their control of their programs and things like that. You can all trace this all back to the very early days of Greenspan and Basic and John Kemeny and how he implemented these trading programs. And I think to this day, Greenspan, although while he was at the head of the Fed, never talked about gold. He's talking a lot about it now, and he's talking about bubbles. And I believe the United States is ready. We have run this system for a long time, soaking up all the advantages of the world's reserve currency. And now we're starting to see that there's no more advantages to get. So I think we are going to try to crash the system, and you're seeing things pointing in that direction. That's the short summary.
I'll tell you what's interesting. I was looking at some long-term charts of the stock market earlier this morning, and I've noticed this before. But you can see that, I'm talking about charts that go back 50, 60, 70 years, and you can see that there's definitely an inflection point in the rise of the stock market just after Greenspan got into the Fed. And I've always felt that while they started opening up the money spigot in 1971, and that's what led to the inflation issues that we had in the late 70s. It was always blamed on OPEC and the price of oil, but that wasn't it. If you go back and look at a chart of M3 on the Fed's website, you can see just after Nixon closed the gold window, the money supply starts to rise at almost a 45-degree angle, going left to right. But then you can see how the bubbles in the stock market have formed. If you're looking at this long-term chart, and you basically can see the bubble that formed the tech bubble, which that would have been precipitated by Greenspan's initial dose of money printing. And then we have the crash. And then you can see the stock market rise up into 2007. And that was basically the housing bubble, which was precipitated by the advent of really easy credit, fraudulent credit, liar loans, all that stuff. But also Greenspan opened up the printing press again, the money spigot.
Yep, and he also fought against any regulation of derivatives. And everybody thought he was doing that, to give the bankers a chance to make more money. But I believe he did that to give the bankers enough rope to hang themselves. Because if you give a banker the ability to create money out of thin air, even without the Federal Reserve in these derivative contracts, they'll do it. And that's exactly what was done.
I have to say, Bix, it is refreshing to hear the optimistic view of that story. But I'm one of those guys who I think that we've been co-opted by the banks. And yeah, the banks, I think that the fight against regulating derivatives, which was really led by Robert Rubin,
right,
not more so than Greenspan, I believe that was so that the banks could make a ton of money. Really, if you look at bank profitability over the last 10 or 15 years, most of their profits have come from derivatives.
I agree 100%. And Rubin, I've long written that Rubin is part of the henchmen of the gold and silver cartels, because he was at Goldman Sachs trading out of Europe before he got involved with the government. And he was a gold trader, and he was the one who went around to different governments to set up the gold leasing program, which they'd lease their physical gold to Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs would sell it into the market and buy futures and options just to control the price. So Rubin is knee deep in this stuff, as well as the people who worked for him, which are quite a few. And I know you're right. You are right that the bankers took over this control in the late 80s, early 90s, and I do think that that there is an element of the real bad scenario where they take over everything, the one world government type of scenario unfolding. I think the real question is going to come down to, are the people ready to say no more bailouts when the next crash hits? And have we learned enough since 2008 to say, hey, we understand the Federal Reserve now. We understand what these bankers are doing. We understand these booms and busts are caused by these bankers, and that's just the way they do it. And we're ready to say no more because we've lost everything due to this corrupt system. I think we're there. I'm hoping we're there, and I think we'll have a chance to either stand up or go down in flames, probably in the September timeframe.
Again, Bix, it's really refreshing to hear the optimistic side of the coin, because my view is that, again, and it's a large part of it has to do with technology and the power of technology. And I just think that the government has erected all of these functions, these governmental functions like Homeland Security and the NSA, et cetera. And I think they've, and obviously the Patriot Act, if you really read through it, you see it wasn't really designed to protect us from terrorists from other countries. It was designed to protect the government from quote unquote domestic terrorism. And I think what they've been able to do is create a control mechanism by which they're going to be able to put down any kind of populist uprising or revolt very quickly.
I agree that was their plan, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, that is the dark side of the story, and most people believe the dark side of the story. And I think they have everything in place. The one thing they need, though, that they cannot function without is control of the monetary system. Because if they can't pay their henchmen to follow up on their orders, then they're not strong enough on their own without the monetary power to get any of this done and to hide it from the people and all that. They've done it so far because they have power of the monetary system. Now the question comes in, and a lot of this stuff I get right from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston's publications, and that's the crazy thing to me. I was the most anti-Fed guy in the world until I got into the Road to Ruta documents at the Fed Boston and looking at the players who were there, Alan Greenspan and this guy Stephen Duveau, who basically set up all the trading systems at the banks. I think he's got one of those, kind of hidden code that he could shut down the system if he wants, because he set up the original systems. So, we'll see. I think if the monetary system crashes and the governments and the banks no longer have the power of creating money out of thin air, I think we do have the potential for a revamping of the system with good, honest people. We'll see, though.
Believe me, I go to bed every night hoping that your view is the view that plays out. But I guess I'm sort of a natural-born cynic, and I just, when I wake up in the morning, it's like the pessimism just invades again. So, but I honestly hope you're right, Bix.
I have no illusions that's the bad guys have the upper hand and have had it for a long time. But there are signs that at least the people, if they lose their checking account, lose their savings account, lose their 401ks, and they can do that with a derivative implosion, then they will stand up, and they know enough about the monetary system and the bad bankers, because we've learned so much in the last 8 to 10 years. I think we can stand up and say no more, just say no type of thing, because we really don't have to do anything to win the game, because they're going to have to reinstitute new monetary systems and new programs that get what they had back, and I don't think anybody's ready to raise their hand and say, yeah, let's return to the old system.
I would agree with that. I mean,
but it's not going to be easy.
No. Well, change never is, and change like what you're describing is that's huge. And that plays into the question that I asked earlier as far as China and Russia and all the gold. I mean, do you see that? Because what you guys have just been focusing on has been primarily Western banking and Western systems. But we have this other entire system that is emerging and emerging very quickly. And they have all of the components in place at this point. I mean, do you see that just coming in and whatever China and Russia decide is going to be the new monetary system, that being the new system, or is it going to be something in conjunction with the Western system, or how's that going to play out?
Well, I don't see. I see the AAIB and all that going on, and them trying to set up a system outside of the Western controlled system, which is normal. And I mean, if the system's going to stay intact, that's the right thing to do. If the system doesn't stay intact and there is a derivative meltdown, and you have a couple of the big banks going down, which brings everybody else down, that system's not going to work either. So basically, when you lose faith in an unbacked fiat monetary system, which is totally and completely based off faith, then it is very difficult to get it back. And that's why over the years, it's always gone back to a gold standard or a silver standard. I think there will be attempts at rejiggering the system, kind of reallocating wealth within different countries, but it'll be messy. But within the United States, if you read my Roto-Rooter work and what I've gotten from the Fed Boston, they've had a plan since the 1970s to reallocate money within the United States after the crash based on what you've paid into Social Security so far. And a lot of people say, well, you can't live off that. Well, if all other money is gone or termed defunct Federal Reserve notes are no longer accepted, a couple $100 of real dollars might be just the thing to get us, up and going again. And it's allocated according to what you've basically worked within the system of the United States. And that was Greenspan's plan way back then. Well, will it work now? Who knows? But I think that will be one of the options on the table.
When do you think the stock market's going to finally crash? I mean, we know it's coming.
Again, I wrote about this in my book. It's controlled. The crash will be controlled like it has been controlled since computers were invented. Now, everybody's thinking it should have already crashed, and are saying to themselves, what is going on? What is keeping everything afloat? And it's the computers. The question is, when do those people who control the computers want it to crash? And if you listen to Christine Lagarde of the IMF and her speech on the magic number 7, we're talking the Jewish Shemitah, which is September timeframe, which is the 7-year cycle, and this is the 7th 7-year cycle, which is the time of Jubilee for those of the Jewish faith. And a lot of our controllers of our system, of our monetary system, are Jewish, and some of them very devout to their religion. So, I mean, if you line up when the U.S. Fiscal year ends at September, everything kind of is pointing to September. I like to say September, October, but it might be a faster crash if things start happening. It all depends on when they click their mouse and say, okay, time to turn the market down, because there is no free trading. The bond bubble is beyond belief right now. And I think that's going to be the mother of all crashes besides the derivative crash. And these banks are so weak now, they can't even handle that. They can't even handle Greece backing out of the euro. How are they going to handle something as big as a bond crash? So my time frame is the September for the big crash, and then how long it takes to rejigger the system or recover from what we had or start a new system is anybody's guess.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bix. Everyone, since the stock market is really the focus of everyone when they think about the markets, I was a junk bond trader for 9 years in the 1990s, and so I know quite a bit about the fixed income markets and liquidity. And you're right. They've been issuing warnings now for quite some time about how illiquid the bond market is. And I hear some stories from former colleagues who I worked with that raise the hair on the back of your neck about just how illiquid the bond market is. When the bond market starts to head south, it's going to make the stock market crash look like a day at the beach.
And I think that's the plan. I think they inflated the bubble on purpose, so that when they pop it, it's much bigger than what happened in 2008. 2008 was mainly driven by the housing market, but there were other factors, and it wasn't quite big enough, and the population wasn't quite smart enough about what was going on. And this time, it's going to be bigger, and we're much smarter than we were in 2008.
That I would agree with wholeheartedly. I think that there's a lot more people that are awake and aware of what's going on. I don't think that there's enough, but I think that there's a lot more people that are aware of what happened in 2008 in particular, and what to expect next time. So
yeah, and if you take away everybody's checking and savings and 401k, you're going to have a lot of awake people very fast,
very, very quickly. You are exactly right.
That's a great point.
Yes, there will be a mass awakening.
That's scary too, because
it is scary.
When you first discover this stuff, you get angry. That's your first response, and then you learn about it, and you settle down over the years. At least I have. But a mass awakening of people with wake up the next day and they can't go to their ATM, you're going to see a lot of anger.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've been speaking with Bix Weir, roadtoruta.com. And Bix, why don't you give yourself a plug here?
Well, I have a website that I send out email service, a free side that a couple emails a week, and then a paid side with a big roundup of what's going on on the Friday road trip is what I call it. It's fun. It takes a little different slant on what's going on out there, and hopefully it's spreading. And I know my subscription base is spreading, so the word is getting out there. And I have a book that I just published. It's an ebook, so it's cheap, and you can get it on the website. And thanks a lot, guys, for having me on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope that we can do this again soon.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks a lot, Bix. Appreciate it.
No problem.
And I'll put a link to your book on my site over at thedailycoin.org. Also, Bix.
Cool. Sounds good.
If I'm able to do that.
Yep.
Well, all right. Well, we won't take up any more of your time, and I certainly appreciate all that you've given us.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Speak to you soon, Bix.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.